Big portal news all over the place for the Ducks.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time. Once again for Locked On Ducks, I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, the number one sports podcast network out there. Thank you all so much, especially my everydayers, for helping make that the case. So much. I don't know where to start. I do know where to start. Iverson Hooks, some more portal losses. Could Kenyon Sadiq really come back? You might know the answer by the time you listen to or watch this show. That is how this has gone. And today's show is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Create an account. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Koi Perich is going to be an Oregon Duck. This feels like Dillon Thieneman 2.0 for a number of reasons. I mean, the resume similarities between these two guys is truly incredible. A 2-year starter at another Big Ten school that's not a Tier 1 Big Ten school. Around 6 feet, 6'1", about 200 pounds, plays at all three levels. I think Perich can slot in if Thieneman winds up going to the NFL. More thoughts on that in just a moment. And play the exact same role. He also, in the eyes of Pro Football Focus, had a great freshman year and significantly regressed his second year. And that feels like it was more due to the situation that he was in. For a hot minute in Minnesota, he played receiver a little and went both ways, and then I think went back to playing on just the defensive side of the ball. He had 5 interceptions as a true freshman in 2024. He was a 4-star recruit with a composite rating on 24/7 of 96.73, which is quite high. That's pushing towards 5-star status. He had 5 picks as a true freshman, just 1 interception this year. Up to 2 years of eligibility left. Dillon Thieneman, by the way, his freshman year at Purdue went from a PFF grade of 89 to 72 his second year. This past year with the Ducks, 91. Perich went from 88.9 to 62. I bet he could push for a 91 grade, and Oregon fans could watch him on the field and notice his presence in a significant way, as they did with Dillon Thieneman. The dude can hit. The dude can tackle. He's good in coverage. I think he's a little bit more prolific as a tackler and playmaker around the line of scrimmage, whereas Thieneman was a really well-rounded guy. But it's not to say that Koi Perich isn't an NFL body type. They have almost the exact same appearance, mannerisms, play style, size, resume. It's just, it feels one-to-one. Now, as I record this show, which I'm not doing until very late at night because the news just continues to unfold, there were 3 times on Monday night in which I was texting with various folks and said, yeah, news has been crazy. I'm not recording yet until all the news has come in. I did that 3 times, and on 2 occasions, within 90 minutes, some other piece of news came down. It definitely feels like, from a volume and rate of news standpoint, because there's just one portal cycle, there's not a second one, definitely feels like we're drinking from a fire hose at this point. And a lot of guys have left. I think Oregon's up to 25 outgoing transfers in this 2026 cycle. Still have not lost a starter. Doesn't look like it's going to move in any other direction. But hey, crazy things can happen and things can change. I think Terrance Green makes 26. So landing Koi Perich, who is the number 1 safety in the transfer portal, number 12 overall player according to 24/7's rankings. This is a big-time pickup. And you know who the top safety was in the last transfer portal cycle? Dillon Thieneman. You know who was awesome? Dillon Thieneman. So when I heard this news, I was very excited. Why? Because Koi Perich is a good football player. And I think in Oregon's system and the different types of schemes and coverages that Oregon has shown, and I don't think they're going to change dramatically with Chris Hampton having been under Tosh Lupoi for the last couple of years. I think they want to have a guy that they feel they can put in that kind of star role, that rover safety role that Thieneman did. Perich absolutely has the ability and experience to do the exact same thing. So I'm stoked they brought in Koi Perich. On the other hand, I think Dillon Thieneman's going to the NFL draft, which makes perfect sense. I think he's one of the top draft eligible safeties in this cycle. We saw how good he was all season long, and Koi Perich, I think, is about as close to a one-to-one replacement for him as you could probably find anywhere. And the strange thing is, if you just lined up their resumes and then did one of those things that, you know, shows a guy's highlights, but everybody's just a shadow, and so you're trying to see based on mannerisms who it is. Mostly I've seen this happen on Twitter with NBA players before. It's guess the NBA player. If you did that with Dillon Thieneman and Koi Perich, I don't think you'd be able to tell the difference. I really don't. So obviously they're different guys, and time will tell how well he's able to perform compared to the high standard that Thieneman set. But yeah, pretty stoked about that one. That is a major addition. And I tell you what, if somehow, because there were some rumblings that Thieneman was thinking about staying, this would indicate he's going to the NFL draft. But if somehow Oregon pulls a rabbit out of a hat and gets both Dillon Thieneman back and Koi Perich, oh boy. Oh boy. The hype machine will be real. But he's not the only defensive back that Oregon added yesterday. It was a quintuple duck emoji day for Dan Lanning on Twitter. Quite the day. And given all the depth departures, I think Oregon fans are seeing that as welcome news. So, Carl Williams IV has been at Baylor for a couple seasons, has battled injuries. I do not think that Williams is the same type of transfer as Koi Perich. I think he's a guy that they're taking a bit of a chance on because injuries derailed this past season. He played just 5 snaps. He got dinged up at the end of the 2024 season as well. He's 6'1", 184 pounds, so a little bit lighter compared to Koi Perich. Was a 3-star in the class of 2023. Everything that I have heard about him from a couple of different places is that the potential is immense. He was expected to be one of the best defensive players, actually, for Baylor this year, and then he got hurt. There are some Justin Jacobs vibes here, who, when healthy, was a really good linebacker for the Ducks, but then got hurt, missed half the season in 2023, never quite found his footing, got into the rotation, and I think that Williams could wind up being a key player in Oregon's secondary. I don't believe that they're bringing him in with the same level of pedigree or expectation that they are with Koi Perich. So 2 additions in the defensive backfield, and Oregon's got a lot of bodies out there, both young and veteran now. Williams, I think, going into his 4th year of college football, even though he's been hurt for a decent amount of it, I think still qualifies as a veteran. Perich definitely a veteran as he started each of the last 2 years with the Golden Gophers. But drop your thoughts in the YouTube comments below. Hit me up on Twitter, however it's easiest to get in touch. These are, like, Williams is an interesting high upside addition. Koi Perich just awesome. Just straight up awesome. Dillon Thieneman round 2. I am here for it. I am also here for round 2 of another one-time transfer, and I think we're going to like this one. First, this episode brought to you by our friends at Wayfair. The new year is here, and it's the perfect time to reset your routine and refresh your space. If you're spending more time at home, you might as well love how it looks and feels. That's why you should turn to Wayfair. It's a one-stop shop for getting your home back on track. From bedding and mattresses to storage solutions for every room, Wayfair makes it easy to start the year fresh. Wayfair has everything you need for a full home refresh all in one place. Whether you're updating your living room, organizing your space, or upgrading your work from home setup, I'm about the work from home life. all about it. Wayfair's huge selection makes it easy to find exactly what works for your style and budget. You can pick up new bedding, you can pick up accent pillows, you can refresh your living room, anything that you want. Wayfair is here to help you get back into a routine, which I'm also all about. Wayfair is the way to go. Get organized, refreshed, and back on track this new year for way less. Head to wayfair.com right now to shop all things home. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. Iverson Hooks. Get used to knowing the name. Another transfer Oregon brought in. They have added 5 in the 2026 cycle. Don't forget about the handful of special teamers that they've added. You know, Keaton Emmett among them. Just throwing it out there. Just don't forget. But they brought in Andrew Olish, the tight end from Penn State, Koi Perich from Minnesota, Iverson Hooks from UAB, Dylan Raiola, of course, from Nebraska. And by the way, you're probably listening to or watching this show as it drops on Tuesday. The deadline for Dante Moore to declare for the draft is Wednesday, the 14th. So I have an idea of what my next show will be about. Let's talk about Iverson Hooks, who could be one of Dante Moore's top targets in 2026. Or he could be the 4th most targeted guy on the field because Oregon has a plethora of weapons. Iverson Hooks is not a very big guy. He comes from UAB, where he just had the best season of his career. 5'10", 175 pounds. Runs like lightning. Also involved in the return game for the Blazers this year. Not the Trailblazers, the UAB Blazers. It's a dragon sort of thing. It's kind of a cool logo. This year, he had 72 catches, 927 yards, 7 touchdowns. He was an all-AAC selection. And notably, Oregon bringing in skill guys from the American Athletic Conference works out every single time. I'm just letting you sit and think about that for a moment. Mekhi Hughes was the last one that they brought in from the American that had all AAC credentials. However, Hooks, I think, has a greater likelihood. No, hindsight's 2020. Mekhi Hughes looked like he'd be the number 1 guy. And Oregon's got some talented true freshmen coming in. So let's leave open that possibility that they think right here, right now, before they've had a chance to see Gatlin Bear and Jalen Lott, the 5-star true freshman receivers, coming in person. Let's leave open the possibility that Hooks is reduced to being a gadget guy, so you don't have to use De'Aaron Hill in those spots, and you can let him just be a true running back, and a return guy, in which case, that'd be totally fine. He could also be the 2nd or 3rd leading receiver for the Ducks next year. I would be surprised if he winds up being Oregon's leading receiver. Malik Benson wound up being Oregon's leading receiver this year, although that was due to injury because DeCorian Moore was leading the team in receiving yards, which is who I had predicted to lead Oregon in receiving yards in 2025. And then he got injured and then slowly, and albeit in a somewhat struggling fashion, worked his way back into the fold. And Oregon kind of already established, Jamari Johnson and Malik Benson, all that sort of stuff. So anyway, when you watch Hooks' tape, he's got 2 years of eligibility left, by the way. I think this is very much a Tez Johnson part 2. Everything about it. Tez Johnson, by the way, came from a conference that's not as good as the American. They're on similar footing. They're both group of 6 leagues. But the American Conference is a tougher average level of competition than the Sun Belt, which is where Tez Johnson came from. So if you're wondering, well, why'd they bring in a guy from a small school? Well, clearly they can evaluate guys from that particular part of the country pretty well. So almost 1,000 yards this year, and UAB didn't have a very good season. I think he was kind of the lone, significant bright spot for them on the offensive side of the ball. But everything about him just looks like Tez. He's small, he's quick, he's explosive, he avoids contact. If you tell me right now he's a starting slot receiver, I'm good to go. And I think this is a replacement for both Gary Bryant and Cooper Perry. And there was a prediction from somewhere, I don't remember exactly where, that two of the Ducks are expected to go down at least and join Tosh Lupoy at Cal. Kingston Lopa already has. Jericho Johnson, Cooper Perry are the others. I imagine more of the defensive linemen are going to go. I'll have more on that later, but I think this is a replacement addition for Cooper Perry, who absolutely, I like Cooper Perry, by the way. I think he could have been an excellent slot possession receiver and would have been a perfectly complementary piece to what you have on the perimeter in DeCorian Moore and Jeremiah McLaughlin. But Oregon's receiver room right now, I think you've got your top three guys. I don't think there's going to be another receiver addition. I don't think there needs to be. You also have to remember that for, depth purposes, in the event that a guy gets hurt, which certainly we've seen happen plenty of times before, you've got the 5-star true freshman. You've also got Dylan Gresham. I'm trying to remember if you still have Jack Wrestler in there, who was not a super highly rated guy, but is a speedster. And yeah, I think he's still on the roster. You got to double check. You got to double check with the number of guys that have gone into the portal. So I think right now your lineup of 6 wideouts would probably be DeCorian and J-Mac 1A 1B. Hooks is probably your number 3, and then a combination of Dylan Gresham, Jalen Lott, and Gatlin Bear. And we saw with DeCorian this year, highly rated 5-star receivers, they're ready to contribute often. And that doesn't mean that all of them are. And it doesn't mean that one of them isn't going to get dinged up somewhere along the way and not be able to give it a go. But at full health, I feel great about these being Oregon's 3 receivers. And look, they could maybe use a big-bodied guy because DeCorian, like Malik Benson is in the 6'1"-ish range. J-Mac and DeCorian are a little bit smaller, and Hooks is a little bit smaller as well. Now, the caveat there, of course, is they're not like Gary Bryant or Cooper Perry, who I think are, middle of the field possession receivers who you're not going to push the ball down the field to a ton. And I don't think you're necessarily going to do that with Hooks. They didn't do that with Tez a whole heck of a lot because he's just a smaller guy. Corey and J-Mac have shown you can push the ball down the field to him. So I don't think just because there isn't a big body like Malik Benson or Troy Franklin, like you've had the last couple of seasons, I don't think there's a lack of a vertical threat whatsoever. I mean, J-Mac and DeCorian can make unbelievable catches, and gosh, I hope they get the chance next year. But Iverson Hooks, the wide receiver addition, I didn't have wide receiver as a top need in the transfer portal. When Cooper Perry left, I thought about it and said, I mean, it's not a number one, got to go out and have it sort of deal. But when you can find a guy like that, I think you go and do it. So Iverson Hooks, first team all name, by the way, without question, is indeed an Oregon Duck. So pretty stoked about that. Not stoked about more transfer departures. First, this episode brought to you by our friends at Game Time. There's nothing like college football season. Tailgates, packed stadiums, being right there in the middle of it all. The energy, the bands, the moments you remember forever at Autzen Stadium that we all miss and can't wait to get back to. Actually getting tickets can be a real pain. It used to be frustrating with long queues, logins, prices jumping at checkout. That is where Game Time comes into play. Game Time is giving the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to unlock amazing college football tickets or anything else you're looking for. Quite frankly, experiences, plays, shows, anything you want, Game Time's got you covered in just a few taps. So I've used Game Time to go to Oregon football games, to go to Oregon basketball games, to go to comedy shows, and the experience has been great. Every single time I've saved money compared to the other ticketing services that I could have bought the exact same seats for and had a great experience. Ticket got on the phone, no problem. Knew what to expect with all-in pricing, the view from the seat. Game Time's just what you want to do. Take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets or anything with Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Create an account. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. I believe the number is now 27 outgoing players, with Terrance Green and Roger Saleapaga announcing on Monday that they are going to enter the transfer portal. And those definitely feel like guys who would follow either Tosh Lupoi or Will Stein. But I wanted to talk about Terrance Green first, because this is, again, somebody that wasn't going to start unless there was an injury, but was a non-zero contributor to the Oregon defense. He logged 269 snaps this year, and we know how often Oregon has rotated defensive linemen, particularly on the interior. I think this is going to be one of the toughest portal assignments Dan Lanning has ever had, to replace this much depth. And I think a lot of this is Tosh Lupoi recruited a bunch of these guys, back in that class of 23 and in 24 as well. Tosh has always been a really good defensive line recruiter and defensive recruiter in general. And you think about guys like Ashton Porter, Jericho Johnson, Terrance Green, Tioni Gray. Tosh is the coach that they committed to play for first and foremost. And so I think that what we're seeing is a product of that. But Oregon played 4 interior defensive linemen this year. And thank goodness Amari Washington and Bear Alexander stayed healthy. God forbid if one of them were to go down. I mean, right now I don't actually know who'd be playing. It's the old Brad Pitt Moneyball. Art, right now if a ground ball is hit to first, no one's going to be there to field it. Right now, if you lined up the second team defense, your interior defensive lineman would be Aiden Breland and probably Matthew Johnson, probably, who played 56 snaps this year. So, yeah, Oregon logged 8 interior defensive linemen on the field in 2025. 4 of them actually logged a statistically significant number of snaps. And of the 4, 2 remain, the 2 that you would want, of course, Amari Washington and Bear Alexander. And of the other 4, 2 of them are gone. So, yeah, right now your interior on the backup is Matthew Johnson and Aiden Breland, who played a combined 120 snaps this year. Now, Breland is going into year 3, so he should be able to, unless there's something with him that's just not working out, or if he enters the portal, frankly, he should be able to hold down the number 3 defensive tackle role. But we see Oregon put a lot of guys on the field. As the year went on, I felt like we saw more and more of Jericho Johnson. So the number of players that Oregon probably needs to add on the defensive line for depth purposes, which can be tough to find because most guys are going in the portal to see more snaps than they saw at their previous spot. So I don't know who you're going to be able to find, because these guys like Terrance Green, Tioni Gray, and Jericho, and Ashton Porter, and the list just goes on, those guys are good rotation pieces for Oregon. But if they go down to Cal with Tosh Lupoi, they're probably starters. And obviously they're not good enough to start at Oregon because you got 2 NFL guys sitting there, and those guys haven't had the opportunity really to develop into that caliber of player. Why? Because of the NFL guys in front of them. And this is one of the reasons I'm so stoked that Amari Washington is back. Obviously, the depth behind him isn't there, so you need to have the high-end talent. We only would have had 1 full year of Amari Washington. His second year, I think he was good enough to play, and he was clearly the number 3 defensive tackle and played a decent number of snaps, and they didn't really have a 4th in that 2024 season. But the reason we didn't get redshirt freshman Amari Washington in a big way, and why I chaired his fan club after the season, was because I saw his potential. But he might have been ready to go, but who was in front of him? Jamari Caldwell and Derek Harmon, who were both playing in the playoffs, making plays over the weekend in the NFL. So I think that's what a lot of these guys are looking at, but it's the Tosh Lupoi factor. That cannot be overstated as to why it feels like all these guys have left. And, Oregon still has most of its returning tacklers, or a good percentage, I should say, from the 2025 season, and still has its entire starting defensive line, all of whom are NFL caliber. But, the importance for Oregon to hit the portal and, frankly, hit the high school recruiting trail and bulk up on these guys again is pretty urgent. Because after this season, you are losing all 4 of them. Amari Washington could technically come back, but I don't think Bear can, and I know that Tatum and Mateo can't. So after this year, and I don't think you're going to be able to keep Amari for the 27 season anyway. So there is going to be a line change, hockey style, on the defensive line after this season. So in the class of 2027, I'm sure one of you will ask, what are your top priorities? Defensive line. Dan Lanning and Chris Hampton and Tony Tuioti, they've got to get to work. But first, before they can do that, they've got to do work in the portal, because you probably need, conservatively, you need three interior defensive linemen and probably 2 edge guys. Probably. Now, Aiden Breland, Elijah Rushing were big-time recruits, haven't flashed special talent just yet. Perhaps this is the year that they're going to be ready to go. And frankly, the opportunity is going to be there. You've also got Tank Jones coming in, 6'3.5", 240 on the edge. Maybe that's somebody that contributes a little bit as a true freshman. But the rest of this 2026 class, it's a little light on defensive linemen compared to what you've had in some of the past years. You know, Prince Tavazon is a guy that reclassified, 6'3", 245. I think he's kind of an Ashton Porter type of body in there. Dutch Horace, not a super highly rated guy, but part of the class at the edge position. Tony Cumberland, maybe one of the longest tenured commits in Oregon history in the class of 2026, 6'4.5", 285. It's great that you brought those guys in. I think at minimum, this is what, from a D-line standpoint, the 2027 class will need to look like, and it might even need to be more than that. And I think when they go into the portal to try and replace all these guys that have left, I think they're going to try and seek out players who, frankly, like Iverson Hooks, can come in and help you right away in a certain role, but also maybe have another couple years of eligibility, like Andrew Olish at tight end. So I want to pivot to that conversation now, because Roger Saleapaga caught a touchdown on Friday in the semifinal. It was a garbage time touchdown, but it was a good catch. He's in the transfer portal. So basically a 1-to-1 swap there. Olish has 4 years of eligibility left. Saleapaga, I believe, has 3. And he did some good things this year. And remember, Oregon uses 3 tight end packages all the time, and they do so very effectively. Think about that first touchdown they scored against Texas Tech. If you watch the replay of that score, yeah, Jordan Davison is really good in the red zone, of course, but Kenyon Sadiq, Jamari Johnson, and Roger Saleapaga are snowplows out there. And there are a non-zero number of run plays this year where Oregon's tight ends are a big part of it. And that's not unique to the Ducks. It's just they do it a lot because they will also pass with 3 tight end looks. Think about that touchdown to Kenyon Sadiq against Minnesota was a cool play design because they showed the jumbo and then they shifted out and then they had 3 tight ends. So Oregon's got to have 3. You do have the 5-star Kendra Harrison coming in, who I think is as ready as a true freshman can possibly be at the tight end position. He's 6'7" and just a freakish athlete. You've got Olish in there, but some of you were wondering, and I know because you sent me notes, I'm not telepathic. That would be so cool, though. As long as I could control it, that would be very, very cool to be Charles Xavier. Anyway, a lot of different. Yeah, okay. I'm not going down the nerd rabbit hole here. So Saleapaga leaves. Does that mean that Kenyon Sadiq is coming back? Look, he loves Oregon. He's been with the Ducks for 3 years. This past season was the first year that we really, like Amari Washington, got to see him fully unleashed. And frankly, from a statistical standpoint, I don't think he hit his ceiling. His draft stock, though, has not wavered a single bit. Because the NFL, I will shout this from the mountaintops from now until the end of time, the NFL doesn't care about that much other than traits. And Kenyon Sadiq has elite traits. We know he's a great blocker. We know he's a great pass catcher. We know he's incredibly fast. He's just unique. He's a Kyle Pitts type athlete, but I think he's a better blocker than Kyle Pitts. He's closer to Brock Bowers, and he can be. So does it mean Sadiq is coming back? Look, as I record the show, we haven't announced it on the SSA. I'd have it at a 1.5. I'll bump it to a 2. I think Saleapaga and Olish are just kind of a flip-flop, though. Could Oregon go 4 deep at tight end? Yeah, I think that's probably the best place to be so that if one guy gets injured, another can step in and you're still in a good spot. I think the most likely tight end room for this upcoming season is Jamari Johnson's tight end 1. There's a battle between Harrison and Olish for tight end 2. The other one's tight end 3. And there you go. I don't think it has a huge bear. I think the fact that they brought Olish in, if they hadn't, then I'd be saying, well, if Saleapaga's not there, then he doesn't see a way up the depth chart. I think he doesn't see a way up to be tight end 1, and maybe he wants to go somewhere in which he's got that opportunity. He was never going to get that here, whether Sadiq is back or not. So, wish him all the best. I certainly would love for Kenyon Sadiq to return, and then the plethora of weapons would be, it'd be something to behold. It's going to be anyway, but it would be quite the sight. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.